everyone. Welcome to Shannon Q. This is Anthony.
Hi.
Who's excited? I'm
What's up?
excited.
So am I. I've been looking forward to this. A little nervous, but I've
I
been
am
looking for. I've been more looking forward to it than nervous about it.
nervous. Oh, Anthony. I mean, I am a formidable human being.
You said it.
Oh, I'm so excited. I'm really pumped that you're here. This conversation has been a while in the making. So I am pumped about it because we're both really passionate about
Yeah.
dialectics. It's hard to find somebody who's a kindred spirit in that way too, I think, where
Mm,
people are really interested in dialectic strategies and conversational dynamics and the ethics that are surrounding them and are really willing to like suss out the minutia of it and see where there's nuance and what's important. So this is going to be a valuable conversation and I'm looking forward to it.
me
But
too.
just in case anybody is foolish enough to not know who you are and where to find you, why don't you tell them what all about what they've been missing their whole lives, not knowing who you are yet?
Oh, you poor things. Well, let me educate you on my background. Well, I became enamored with the conversational approach back in 2013 or so. That was basically setting aside argumentation and ridicule for a way of engaging with people where you predominantly ask questions and then give people plenty of time to explain how they arrived at it. And that was a game changer for me because it improved my interactions with other people. Even relationships that I've damaged, I've been able to repair some of them by using this approach.
That's great.
And then I started going out and initiating talks with people and recording those conversations, putting them on my YouTube channel because I wanted to show people how to do it and get feedback from others on how to improve. And it's blown up. It's been gaining momentum over the years, and a lot of people have been. It's street epistemology is what I'm talking about, by the way. But it's been catching people's attention, and it's gotten to the point now where I've started with a few other colleagues. We started a nonprofit called Street Epistemology International, so that we can, I guess, try to legitimize what we're doing, get some funding to study this scientifically, and develop materials to teach people how to use this approach. And I've had amazing conversations with people over the years on a variety of different topics. And I'm an atheist. I'm an atheist activist also. So when I discovered a tool that can be really effective in helping theists take another look at their views, well, that was appealing to me. However, we sort of realized early on that you could use this approach for all different types of claims. And we want theists to use this approach with us silly atheists too, to challenge the claims that we have. And yeah, this is an area that I'm really interested in, this idea of conversations and the ethical implications of the conversations that we're having and how beliefs are formed and changed and modified. All these types of things are extremely interesting to me. And it seems like we have a genuine interest in that field. And we're like, it's like sort of like we're psychology interfaces with philosophy.
Yeah, that's a
That's
good
kind
way
of
of
where I
putting it.
see, yeah,
Interesting.
it's kind
Yeah.
of where I see this happening. But yeah, thank you for having me on your show. I was looking, we were on I think we were on this show maybe 6 months or so ago,
Yeah, a while ago on the line.
taking some calls.
Yeah.
Yeah. But it's really nice to be here. So thank you.
Yeah, no, it's really nice to have you here and be able to just like actually have a long form conversation. I'm not going to waste too much time because I think that we have a lot to talk about, so I'll get right into it.
Yeah.
So, when it comes to street epistemology, I hear lots of criticism, and I'm not somebody who actually employs street epistemology, but I've been somebody who's been compared frequently to a street epistemologist. Where where I hear criticisms about street epistemology, and this is what I want to suss out because I don't know how legitimate they are or not, and I think this is a good starting off point, is that it's employed almost as a tool, like it's not a conversation, people seem to say. It's almost like an interrogation, and they feel as though because of that aspect, because it's not as much of a back and forth, it's more putting someone on the spot and continuously kind of asking them questions, that maybe it's not uh, as, I don't want to say ethical because you're asking for consent before going into it. We've had this discussion before and I'm getting ahead of myself, but it maybe puts people in like a different sort of emotional state. And I want your thoughts on that because I'm not sure where I fall on it. I'm really not, because you are asking for consent going in. People know what they're signed up for. But what do you think?
Well, I guess fundamentally, what is street epistemology?
Mm-hmm.
Because if some people are observing your interactions and saying, well, you're doing that street epistemology stuff, there might be certain things that you're doing that intersect the street epistemology approach, I suppose.
Oh, yeah.
But then there might be some things that we're doing in street epistemology that go above and beyond like a normal conversation
I agree.
too. So the challenging thing is we still are figuring out what street epistemology is, which
Okay.
sounds kind of ridiculous to say it out loud because we've been doing it for so long. Um, it's interesting. I'd be curious to find out specifically what they've observed in your interactions to say, oh, she's doing SE, and then, oh, she just crossed the line and she's no longer doing SE. Because I would suspect that there would be a lot of disagreement as far as what qualifies as this approach of using these questions to challenge beliefs. Now, as far as like, how is it different from a real conversation? I do think it is different. It's, if you look at a normal conversation where people are talking and they're hashing out ideas and maybe providing evidence, and then you look at a street epistemology example, there's differences. You'll notice that we often place the focus on the person making the claim, where in a normal conversation, it might be a back and forth.
Right.
And you use the word interrogation, which I think has a negative connotation. However, it doesn't have to be.
Okay.
Like you can have a respectful interrogation of somebody's views where it's a one-way directed interview of sorts to be like, and you mentioned consent. Can we spend 10 or 15 minutes just really getting down to how you determine that this is true? Are you okay with that? And then just focus on them at the pace that they're comfortable with. That's probably another consideration.
Right.
So that we can understand how they came to that conclusion. Now, that's a lot different than a normal conversation, which is usually a back and forth. And here's what I think. I think people will notice that there's elements missing in an SE conversation, and it catches their attention, and it's detected as something unusual. And if something's unusual, maybe we are suspicious of it.
Oh,
and
fair.
maybe, maybe that is tainting people's perception of the approach a little bit. All I'd ask is this, is that be open to considering that there might be an occasionally better way of engaging with people about their deeply held beliefs than the normal way that we normally do it. And it's not to say that this is the one and only way that we're advocating for. This isn't to replace normal human conversation, but I do see it as a tool, honestly, that you can say, listen, rather than having this normal conversation that we're having, can I try a different approach where I'm strictly interrogating you as politely as possible? Would you be okay if I did that? And if they agree to doing that, then I would say that that's completely fine.
Yeah, I would agree. So I think some of where the criticism falls apart for me that people have of street epistemology is that I think, and this is just my perspective, that it puts people in a dissonant state because they're not used to having a spotlight on how they come to decisions, determinations, and beliefs in such a way, especially such an introspective way, right? Where you're forced to really on the spot analyze it. And that brings forth a sense of discomfort. And that discomfort is kind of married to this feeling that something maybe isn't right about this, or maybe if you're watching it happen with other people, you can get that sort of empathetic twang of, oh, I would feel uncomfortable if I had to answer these types of questions. And that discomfort is then seen as, okay, this is an unfair conversation. But where it's seen as ethical to me is the consent at the beginning. Like you're saying, at any point in time, you can pull the cord. You're not trapped here. This is just a thing we're doing. Are you open to it? I don't know. Do you feel that like maybe that might be some of what, this is just speculative on my part, but I think that might be some of what fuels the criticism.
I think that's a big part of it, that people are observing. Most of the criticisms about SE that I've ever encountered are from people who have watched or observed examples, and then they notice things about it that they didn't like. And then they say, well, therefore, the whole method is problematic, or it's deceptive or manipulative or whatever adjective that you want to use. I don't ever get that from the people that I've used the method with.
Right. So they
which is the
good feeling.
They usually, yes, maybe they're a little bit uncomfortable in the examination of their own beliefs because they haven't done it before, and maybe they do feel on the spot. And we should probably make a distinction between people who are initiating talks on the streets with cameras and putting them on their YouTube channel, which is what I do.
That's important.
It is.
Yeah.
From the people who use the approach because an opportunity arose. Yes. And they decided to deviate, hopefully with informed consent, to say, can I try this different approach of exploring this belief with you? Now, that's an interest, what you're raising, like maybe there is something psychologically happening to an individual in that moment that opens them up even further to self-reflection, or you mentioned, like, I think you said something like maybe cognitive dissonance or some sort of mental state that makes them more reflective or something. Now, that's an interesting thing. Like, let's say that we did have the ability to manipulate people to become more reflective about their views for the benefit of their own self.
Would it be ethical to do that, though? I don't know if it would be, because then you would be making a determination of, I know what's better for you than you do. And I think that's where the ethics falls apart for me. Like, because that would seem as though you're saying, okay, I want to get you to this state because I think that this state is what's objectively going to be better for you. Where do you draw lines with that sort of reasoning about why something is or isn't okay?
This is where I draw the line, is I ask them if they are okay going there.
Right. Okay. Which the consent is everything.
Yeah, but you can be really
consent too.
Informed consent. It needs to be informed, because you can just lay out a shitty explanation of what you're trying to do.
Yeah.
And when I don't know how many of my videos you watch, Shannon, but
lots.
Okay, but if you go back really far, I'm just like flipping my camera up and saying, "Why do you believe in God? You're on, go." Which is admittedly horrible and problematic, but it shows, I think, how far we've come. But I do think we have a ways to go too, because there are probably lengths that we can go to that then cross the line to say, like, okay, you've now gone above and beyond of explaining what I'm getting myself into, to the point where I'm getting annoyed that you're not moving on to the actual thing that I'm consenting to. But it's a challenge. It's a challenge, because you can have a good conversation and still at the end, a person might say, I really wish you would explain better what I was getting into here. Well, so you could be surprised.
Why don't we talk a little bit about what street epistemology even is too? Because I think that we're both of us are kind of having this conversation under the assumption that the audience is already like familiar enough to know what we're speaking to. So why don't you, or do you mind just kind of laying out the framework, like as succinctly as, I know it's probably not easy, but as succinctly as you can?
It's pretty easy now because I've done it like a million times. So street epistemology is essentially trying to take yourself out of the, try to distance yourself and the person that you're speaking with from the belief as much as possible, for the purpose of exploring it to see, how did I form it? Why do I think it's true? What would my life be like without this belief? Are the reasons that I used sufficient to be so sure that it's true? And did I use a reliable method for verifying those reasons? That's essentially what street epistemology is. And it's usually enacted in the form of asking questions. Now, I wrote this down. We're not just asking questions. So we need to stop saying that as street epistemologists.
The questions have a very specific sort of style or type or direction, I would say.
Yeah, I think so.
Like they're purposefully constructed in order to elicit a certain type of cognitive state or introspective state.
I don't know if I'd go that far.
They're not accidental.
Well, I mean, my mind is forming the question to help the person reflect on their views, I suppose.
Okay.
But whether or not that happens or not is completely up to them.
Okay.
Like, I would love it if I asked a question that caused a person to say, damn, I've never really thought about my belief in that way before. Like, I would see that as a success.
Okay.
But I'm not afraid of alerting people to the fact that they may be wondering about the things that I'm asking them. Okay. So I'm not ashamed or shy about explaining what the end result of these types of questions could be.
Okay.
But just to finish out the explanation of SE.
Yeah, sorry, I interrupted.
We abbreviate it as SE. So, oh, my son's playing the piano in the background. I hope that's not a problem.
We have a soundtrack. That's fine.
Oh, my door just opened too. Maybe he'll shut the door. Hold on one second. I'm sorry.
Yeah, you're okay. I guess there goes our soundtrack. Fine.
I'm a dad, sir.
You're okay. I like the telescope.
Is that cool? That's my dad's,
cool.
actually.
I love it.
Yeah. I've never used it. I think it's broken.
Oh no.
Yeah, I don't even know.
Aesthetically, it's lovely in the background.
Thank you very much. And I notice I'm getting all blurry now. So what I think what sets street epistemology apart is that the entire focus of the discussion, generally, when you're using it, is to make it all about the person that has made the claim,
Okay.
and to try to be a reflection to the belief structure that they built to get to their conclusion that they think is true. And it's assessing their level of certainty or confidence that what they've concluded really is the case.
Right.
And then when you start exploring the reasons that are supporting this structure, it's ultimately up to them to say, like, is that a good enough reason to be that sure that this is true? And then once there's that sort of reflective moment, it's usually when people who practice this approach tend to end the talk, or up to this point, sometimes we may notice that our conversation partner is getting even a little overwhelmed by the questions that we're asking. Because like, as you mentioned at the start, we're not often used to thinking about our thoughts
True.
to begin with. And we're not used to thinking about our thoughts in this manner. It's different. So it's sort of walking a fine line between challenging a person, but keeping it respectful. That's sort of what street epistemology is. And it's so easy to flip one way or the other, where now you're debating, or you're too passive and you're just letting people walk all over you and just say the most ridiculous things without any pushback. Like, it's a really delicate sort of approach, I suppose. You know, it's kind of challenging.
Very cool. So
I hope that kind of explains what SE is, and we use it for all the different types of claims too. It doesn't have to be about God claims or supernatural claims, and it's not just for atheists too. By the way, like, we want everybody to sort of learn this approach and turn it around and use it on the people who have been using it with you. It's an equal opportunity tool.
Interesting. So if somebody, this is an interesting question, then I wanted to get to the other thing that I wanted to ask. So when somebody asks you a question back in a street epistemology session, what would you usually answer the question, or do you need to get back on track to, like, if somebody asks you a question, does that is then like parlay into a conversation, or is it there an answer to the question and then like kind of a moving back towards you asking the questions, or is it fluid like that?
It can be anything that the practitioner wants it to be.
Okay.
There might be a practitioner of SE who says, I want to make this a one-way directed thing for the next hour. Are you okay with that?
Okay.
And then they actually adhere to that. Mm-hmm. But humans don't usually interact that way, right, unless you're sitting down for an interview or something, which is really kind of how I propose it. Mm-hmm. So, but then there are also times where I may have started the conversation and they've agreed to letting me respectfully interrogate their views, and we're 10 or 15 minutes into it, and then they ask me some questions about where I stand on their same claim, or why are you out here? That's often a common question.
Okay.
Why are you asking me these questions in this manner? I've never been asked this before. And what's your point? What's your purpose? What's your goal here? So that's an opportunity for the practitioner to say, like, well, now how do I want to respond to that? Mm-hmm. Do I want to stay focused on the claim because we've made so much good progress in the last 15 to 20 minutes? Or do I want to be a human and actually answer the freaking question to their satisfaction, and then maybe revisit consent before getting back to their thing?
See, that's what
I would push for the latter.
Yeah, because to me, that's a sign that someone is getting uncomfortable in a conversation. Like, they feel as though they're on one side of a conversation that they may not be comfortable with anymore. So I would want to, instead of pushing them through to sitting in that discomfort, get them back to where they understand what's going on and what my intentions are as they relate to them in this particular dialogue, so that they can have a chance to either leave, or we can get to a point where we could progress.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's probably the right thing to do in these interactions is go where they take you. So if they're done with you asking questions and they want to ask you questions in return, then I think you have an obligation to go in that direction if you are also willing to consent. Like, consent goes both ways.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, totally.
So they may be so upset. I mean, this is rare, but I imagine a person could be embarrassed or upset by how they responded to your questions, and now they're sort of on an attack mode to get back at you for something, maybe. So if you feel like the conversation is now going in a negative direction, with them being the interrogator in a negative, harsh way, I suppose you could say, listen, this really wasn't the type of I don't know where I'm looking for here. This really wasn't the type of interaction I was hoping for. I really wanted to keep it really positive, and it seems like it's going negative. But most people, I have to tell you, like they're intrigued by what you're doing.
Yeah.
Because they're not used to these types of questions, and they often do want to know where you stand. And I do think you should be prepared to respond as openly and honestly as to what you're doing when they ask it. And there have been a couple times where I've actually said, like, if at any point you want to know where I stand on your claim, please let me know.
Oh, I like that strategy.
Yeah.
Very good, because then you're being really transparent with, where you are with respect to. I love that.
But it can be challenging to the progress. This is the dilemma that I think people who use this tool face, is that, God dang it, if I reveal my position, it could actually hamper the progress that we were making on exploring their views and how they could be so sure that this is true.
Yeah.
And so that's a difficult thing to tear yourself away from when you're making progress, to be like, okay, let's set that aside, and now we can focus on me, and I'll answer any question that you have, with the understanding that it could make you more defensive and maybe even want to end the conversation. So like if I'm talking to a theist and they find out, holy shit, I don't know, I just assumed you were a Christian asking these questions out here.
Right.
If I'd known that you were an atheist, I would have never agreed to it or something. I mean, you could get that type of reaction.
Which could very well be the case. I've had people just flat out refuse to talk to me once they found out that I was an atheist.
Yeah, some people get really defensive. You can see it in their body language, how they react, the words that they use.
Yeah.
But sometimes, and especially younger people, I've noticed that they're more open to the idea of talking to people who don't believe. They're excited to have encountered somebody who disagrees with them. And because hopefully you've been interrogating their views really respectfully, they're going to probably be expecting that type of response from you in return. So now they're possibly encouraged to ask questions that they never would have asked an atheist, because of the way I've carried myself when I was interrogating their views.
Fair enough.
So it's usually I was more worried about there being a downside to revealing my own position when I started this stuff than I am today. I'm completely fine doing it, but people who do this approach should be aware that it could hamper your conversation. But I think it's the right thing to do. Is just, if someone wants to know where you stand on their claim, you should tell them.
Yeah, you shouldn't bury that lead, because then it would seem almost like you're kind of being shifty in the conversation. Which is going to get them up as well, like that. But by the same token, I think would cause regression. You've used the word progress a couple times. I'm curious, when you say progress in these conversations, what do you like? How do you quantify that? Like,
clarity.
Clarity. Oh, okay. So them coming to more clarity about why they believe the things that they do and why. Okay.
So like clarity would be me being able to repeat back the main justification for them thinking that something is true as good or better than they would have phrased it themselves.
Okay.
So like understanding to the point where you can completely repeat back, like being a mirror, like I mentioned, like I totally get what you're saying and how you've gotten there. And that I think that's progress. Like progress, people get really hung up. We should probably talk about the belief scale too at some point.
Yeah, we still have to talk about cameras. We're going to be here forever.
I know.
Go ahead.
Yeah. People get really hung up on certain aspects of SE. And one of them, I think, is like people will maybe watch videos, maybe not recent ones, but older ones where I've demurred and say, well, why don't I just answer that at the end of the talk? Or this interview is really about your beliefs, and I don't really want to answer that. I don't think I've ever said that, but you could say that. I could see somebody watching that and thinking, yeah, he's holding back something. So the perception of people observing you not disclosing exactly what you're doing has negative implications for people's perceptions of the approach. So
especially when it's couched within this scaffolding of like atheist versus theist.
Good point.
And people,
here's that sneaky atheist going out. And of course, what's the name of the book?
People have, right?
Right. And the name of the book that started all this is A Manual for Creating Atheists. So it goes hand in hand. It's been really tough. Like it's been that book has been good and bad. And the most bad part about it was the title and the perception that it gave. Like, I wish I can give credit, but I heard somebody say it should have been called A Manual for Creating Doubters, because doubting is healthy and helpful and can help us correct malformed decisions. Like, I think doubt can be, that's a whole other topic we can get into. Like you could have a really good reason for thinking that a God is real. And this approach would reveal that you have a good reason and reliable methods for thinking that that's true.
Right.
So it isn't always about bringing people to atheism, but because of that baggage, I think it's it's been an uphill climb ever since we've started doing it. But I'm optimistic that in one day, and maybe as people become more atheist, like ironically, that might be the thing to kind of finally break the perception that this is just for an sort of an atheist
Well, that's
audience.
also where you mostly see it being used as well, is
Yeah.
atheists discussing beliefs with theists. That's almost exclusively the realm in which you see it being deployed, which gives people that impression, I think, potentially also, that this is a tool in the arsenal specifically of atheists to use against theists, because they see it as this adversarial sort of relationship.
Yeah. I've got some thoughts on that.
Okay, yeah,
Like,
go.
it is a tool that atheists can use to engage with theists, to challenge them about their views in a very effective way, to the point where they may say, I can no longer justify this belief. This is the catch-22. Like, the tool can and has been used for that purpose, but it can do so much more. And it's the benefit of helping other people look at all the views that we hold that gives this tool so much. It makes it very exciting for me to want to promote this tool, because I could see the benefits of using it can have on society and backing humans out of problematic views that they've formed. But we have this sort of a stigma, I think, because of the whole atheist theist thing going on.
Before we get, I really want to get to the TV thing, but I covered this a little bit before we started. One of the
TV
reasons
thing?
about being on camera, putting people on camera. Yeah, so, everything's a TV to me because I'm old. If it's a screen with stuff on it, it's a TV.
Right. We film stuff. We don't record, right?
Yeah, exactly. We put VHS in the VCR and then we watch it on the TV. But what I touched base on before is that I have an eye towards how people use rhetorical strategies and coercive language in dialectics as a manipulation strategy sometimes, to, like, in order to abuse people or in order to coerce people, or like, so having an eye towards that dialectic ethics is something that's so super important to me, which is why I have such respect for you, because you take it very, very seriously. And that's why I'm glad that you're here talking about it, because I don't want this to feel like I'm interrogating you on here. Like, if you have questions for me and my strategy, but it's so up for scrutiny so many times, because where I'm going with this is you've mentioned a couple times that, like, using this strategy or this tool is a really powerful tactic. And because it's a really powerful tactic, people could utilize it nefariously, theoretically, to my mind. And knowing how to identify if somebody is using a rhetorical strategy or a dialectic strategy in a way that is nefarious, and how to spot that, is something that's super important. Not just putting street epistemology on the pyre and saying it is a manipulation.
Any approach.
Any rhetorical strategy, any dialectic approach can have aspects that can be used to manipulate or coerce or abuse. And learning how to identify them, especially with a tool this powerful, would be ideal, I think. And recognizing that when you have a powerful dialectic tool that can put people into a cognitive state that forces them into analyzing things that are very important to them and based on emotion, knowing how to approach that ethically is important. You know, with great power, what'd Spider-Man say? With great power comes
great responsibility.
Yeah, exactly.
This is one of the reasons why I wanted to be on your show, because I know it's important to you.
Yeah.
I know that you ask tough questions, and I want people to challenge what we're doing, because I'm not going to be around forever. You won't be around forever,
right.
But this tool will be around well after we're gone.
Right.
And we're in the early stages of this thing. So these are the types of discussions we need to have about this tool to make sure that it doesn't cross those lines, because I think you probably could use this for nefarious purposes. I don't think there's any question about it. I don't know exactly how that would look. Like, I'd really like to see somebody try to nefariously use this approach in some way. I'm genuinely curious, like, how that would look. Maybe it would look exactly like the video examples we're putting up. I hope not. Like, I don't know. But my point here is that we have a really powerful tool in our hands. Like, we're not worried about the ethics of normal interactions and debating and ridiculing people, which is kind of funny. that we don't get worked up about
Oh,
that.
I am super worried about that stuff.
Are you too? Okay.
Oh my God, yes, all the time. Like I just did. I'm just did
I
like
might
a
be in my
tweet
own
string the
bubble
other day.
because the only criticism that I hear generally is about, and it's not actually that much, but it's about the SE approach. Like,
Yeah, that's why I mentioned I don't want this to seem like I'm interrogating you. Like I said, and I want to talk about dialectic strategies in general. And I think that street epistemology is a good place to go because there's so many you've so many conversations, and there's so many opportunities to really critically analyze this. And that's why, like, I want you to throw it back on me too because I've gone awry.
I have a question for you.
Yeah, no, go
please.
ahead. I was just about to admit that I've gone awry. Like there's been situations that I have, because I'm not a street epistemologist, but I'm somebody who cares a lot about dialectic ethics and engages in conversations and tries to model better conversations. And I would be remiss if I didn't admit that there are many times that I have had conversations that I've either been tired or fed up or emotionally not in the appropriate place, but also on a platform where I have this sphere of influence that needs to be taken seriously and I need to have reverence for it, that I have I've let slide because of frustration or whatever, and have been guilty of that in moments. And it's a struggle trying to balance being a human person who sometimes goes, you know what, fuck you, with somebody who's trying to model better conversation who goes, okay, well, what's the best strategy to employ here in order for this to be a fruitful conversation? That's something I struggle with.
This is awesome. I struggle with it too. In fact, I got kicked off of a live stream on TikTok because it was a theist, and he was, I don't even want to give too many specifics, but he was saying, listen, I've hardly ever had to kick somebody off of my live stream, but he kicked me off. And so I'm not always in my best behavior. If it's 11 o'clock at night, I got a little buzz going on, and I'm kicking back and enjoying TikTok. I'm not going to be Anthony, the executive director of this org who's been promoting, but I still will ask the questions. And sometimes I go a little bit beyond than what I should. Being completely aware that other people who know me could be watching that and thinking, holy shit, like he's a two-faced or something. But this gets to a really important point. For anyone interested in using this tool or excited about it, it's okay to not always use it, because it takes a certain mindset to get into the frame of mind to challenge people's beliefs in a respectful way, where you're getting consent and you're moving at their pace, and you're thinking, oh gosh, like I could probably ask 5 more questions and they will be twisted up into some knot. And it's like, no, but let's go at their speed. It's challenging. It's challenging to get yourself into that mindset of the responsibilities that come with wielding the tool. It's a human failing that I think anyone that learns this tool will struggle with, that there will be times that you're just going to want to argue and give people facts and ridicule them. I do it on Twitter occasionally. I've seen your tweets too. Yeah, that's the dilemma that we have. But I think we have to, like, it's like we said at the very start, it's an unusual way of exploring people's views that's counterintuitive. And it's counterintuitive for the recipient as well as the practitioner, and it's something that we struggle with.
Agree. You said you had a question for me, and so go for
I was going to ask you, okay, what can we do to make street epistemology more ethical in your view? What specific things, and maybe we don't even have to limit it to SE, but just in interactions in general, like what would make a dialectical exploration of somebody's views more ethical than what we're currently doing and seeing?
Such a good question. That's something I grapple with constantly, because you can get to a line where in order to be anything considered ethical, you can't talk to people anymore. You know what I mean? Like you need to find this balance between being able to challenge other people, especially people that you feel have beliefs that they're propagating or might be harmful to themselves or others, and also being respectful of their emotions, being respectful of an audience that you may have, be taking into consideration what their past history may be with conversations. This is a big one for me that I'm constantly dealing with, is that every time, and I've said the very first video I put on here and I say it consistently, every time you're having a conversation with somebody, you're not just having a conversation with them. You're having a conversation with them and everybody they see as like you that they've had a previous conversation like this with, especially in our realm. So when I'm interacting with a theist or I'm interacting with, someone I disagree with about whatever, their engagement strategy with me is going to oftentimes be slightly adversarial just on reflex, naturally based on the previous experiences that they've had. So,
with atheists specifically?
Well, yeah, or whoever else disagreed with them. If it's a contentious subject, right? Not all difficult conversations are
Right.
about religion.
It could be a conservative talking with a liberal, right? If they learn that you're a liberal. This kind of gets back to the disclosure at the start. Revealing where I stand on their claim has implications for how they will respond to your exploration of their views.
Yeah. And also, if you're going to continue in the conversation, sometimes I have to kind of bite it in a conversation, because I'll lay down a boundary, and if they if they go past those boundaries, I'll push back. But sometimes in a conversation, I'll eat it a little bit. I'll just swallow some of the stuff that comes at me, because I have this recognition that this person doesn't know me. This is a contentious topic. They've had really energetic and potentially very detrimental conversations in the past that I need to be able to, I need to be able to sit through their emotions so that I can help them recognize that I want to be in this conversation and I actually care what they're saying and I'm listening to them, because everybody goes into these sort of dynamics with a history. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
With a history.
And if what I've noticed that too, like if somebody comes really hard at me, like they tease me for something, or they say I'm stupid, and then I'm really interested in still engaging with them. I've noticed that if I ignore the slight, like they've said something worth exploring, but then they stuck in a little jab, I'll ignore the jab. To deter
you. Yeah. To get you off it. Yeah.
And what usually happens, we chase the jab. Don't do that. Ignore the jab and focus on the actual meat of what they've said. And if you do, you might have to do that 2 or 3 times, but by the 3rd time, they won't be jabbing at you anymore.
Yeah.
Now, but here's my question for you, I guess.
Okay.
Like, is our recognition that ignoring the jab can be beneficial for exploring their beliefs be in and of itself a form of manipulation or persuasion, or crossing the line into an unethical realm because we're intentionally ignoring certain things?
Well, that's where we get to the point that now you can't have any conversations at all, right?
Yeah.
Because you have no idea what anybody's motivations are. You have to have a certain set of assumptions in a dialogue. And I don't think that, and I'm going to predicate this before I even continue by saying, if somebody is abusive to you in a conversation, this isn't me endorsing that you should ignore that and go through the conversation. I'm talking about if you have a specific set of goals, like if you're having a public conversation or you want to get to what somebody believes, or you want to continue this conversation and have it be better, if that's what your goal is and you're comfortable continuing, that's what I'm talking about. I'm not saying talk to abusive people. I just need to make sure.
Yeah.
I just need to make sure that people know that their boundaries matter. Right.
Consent goes both ways, right? All parties involved in this exploration of anyone's belief is contingent on both people consenting to do it.
But like, why would I guess I'm trying to figure out why ignoring a jab would even be unethical, because that's somebody attempting to abuse or coerce you in a I was going to say relationship. Well, I guess a conversation is a form of relationship. In a conversation, and you taking that power from them in the moment to continue the conversation that you agreed to have. Like if you go into a conversation, let's just say I agree to have a conversation with you about whatever, the Trump or something, right? You're a huge Trump supporter. I'm not. You're starting to get a little bit belligerent with me because I know he's not. Sorry. I was picking something really contentious, but neither of us
actually almost had my little
Bernie guy. Okay, just nobody come at Anthony. I was purposefully picking something not religious but highly contentious. Sorry.
Yes.
But so that would be emotional. Like people get emotional about these dialogues and get insulting to one another because it comes with this set of schemas that you have of people who are on this side and people who are on this side that feeds your emotional response and your perceptions of each other. That's why I picked that one. So if you say we're going to have this conversation, we want to talk about why we both have this different perspective, and somebody is throwing insults at you, that's them being unethical in a conversation. And you're choosing whether or not you want to, like somebody insulting you in a conversation.
Why is that unethical? But I don't see why that's unethical. I think
you don't think insulting somebody is.
I don't think it's nice, but I don't see why why would that be unethical? Like, this gets to sincerity. Like, if somebody's taking a jab at you, they're probably sincerely expressing that they dislike you in some way. And that might actually be more ethical than me holding back and just absorbing it and ignoring the jab.
That's an interesting perspective that I haven't.
It's really kind of bizarre and backwards when you think about it. Like,
because you're saying, I recognize what this is intending to do. Like, you as the person who's ignoring the jab are saying, I recognize what you're intending to do with this, and I'm choosing to not let you pursue that course of direction in this interaction. To
benefit the conversation, though. Like, I would argue, like, I'm actually doing something intentional because I know I have a high degree of confidence that it will probably be beneficial for the conversation. Mm-hmm. So that recognition that it's tough, isn't it? Because
it is, right?
I've learned that is a very smart thing to do in an interaction, because oftentimes the person who was throwing those jabs can feel bad about doing it because they're not getting it in return. Mm-hmm. And then maybe they want to stick into the conversation longer because now they feel they have to make up some ground because you're being so freaking nice. Like, that's what I'm saying. Like, this is a really great area. Yeah. It might actually be more ethical to be as sincere and direct as possible, even if you're being an asshole.
So would you say, in order to, this is interesting to me because there's such minutia here, but I recognize what you're saying, and I just never thought of it I just literally had never thought of it that way. That person in that interaction, in that moment, saying, hey, you're an asshole and I hate you, is actually being the honest one. And
right.
The person,
because I could be thinking the same thing but not saying it. So who's the more ethical person there?
I've never done that.
Suspicious sip from the cup at the moment. Yeah.
What the ethical thing to do in that circumstance, say, I recognize that you don't like me, but perhaps I have emotions regarding you too, but I don't think expressing them to one another right now is going to be what best progresses this conversation.
Exactly. So that's
articulating. It makes it
disclosing and articulating your true intent. Like,
I love that.
But waiting for the right moment. So that's what I think helps this make it more ethical. So I would have no problem waiting until they jab at you 3 times, you ignore it.
Yeah.
And you have this wonderful discussion, and now you're sort of wrapping things up. There's nothing wrong, I think, with saying, listen, I'll speak for myself. Like, listen, when you jabbed at me 3 times, I almost checked out of the conversation, but I was intentionally ignoring it because I thought it could aid our progress.
Right.
I don't have any problem revealing it, but the fact that I decided to reveal it afterwards and not in the moment might cross some sort of ethical line too.
So for you, when it comes to dialectical
we're really
ethics,
getting into the weeds here on this.
No, I love it. I love this shit. Okay, so so for you, if I'm understanding your perspective, what comes down to making any dialectic strategy ethical is openness and truthfulness. So just about your intentions in that dialogue. Yes. Getting consent from the other person and just giving them awareness of what your strategies are. I think that's fair.
Now, here's the thing. People aren't used to people doing that. So when they see you doing it, they can often be like, oh, now I'm really suspicious. What is this person up to?
What the fuck is going on?
Why are they revealing so much about
what are you angling at?
Right.
Yeah.
Now, so like, I will often over-explain what I'm doing, not only for the person that I'm speaking with, but because of, and this might be a good transition to the video or the television.
Oh yeah, that's right. We were going to talk about TV.
Like, there's an advantage to over-explaining and over-disclosing for the purpose of the people who will be watching and potentially critiquing what you're doing.
Yeah, it's a whole different.
But then again, what are my motivations for disclosing it? Is it to appease the critics who will be watching the video, or is it to really further the conversation?
Well, that adds a whole other paradigm of motivations when it comes to conversation. Like, you and I are having a conversation right now. Just like, it's just the two of us. We can't hear anybody else. We can't see anybody else. But we are both acutely aware of the fact that there's, I don't know how many people like.
Are you recording this, by the way? Because I don't see the recording.
Oh, we're live, dude.
Oh, we're live. Okay.
We're live.
Normally I see like a live or something along those
No,
lines.
yeah,
But
no,
yeah,
we're live.
as
We're
far as I
live.
can tell, it's just you and I here.
Yeah, no, it's through OBS. I told you we were Anthony. Don't make it seem.
No, you told me, but I didn't get any indication that that's what was happening, and I
I
didn't
said
check.
we were going live. Okay, now I feel. Don't do that.
No, 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 no. No, it was my impression that we would be going live. I just didn't have any indication that we were.
Oh, okay. I thought
Other,
when
other
I
than
said,
you saying
hi,
it.
I'm Shannon Q. We're live. This
No.
is Anthony.
Just move on. Move on.
Okay. So anyway, we're both acutely aware of the fact that there are people watching us. Now we are. A couple hundred people are watching us. Maybe you weren't before, but now you are. So
I'm not 100% sure though, but yeah.
oh my
okay.
God. How certain am I that I'm live? Given my channel's history with tech issues, maybe 40. 40, 50 tops. So that changes the way that you're going to engage. Like if you and I were just sitting down and nobody was watching us, which we had like in person before. Oh,
Just before, I mean, we spent 20 minutes before this live stream chatting, right?
right, exactly. And like, and you and I have been face to face when I was in Texas and chatted, and it's a completely different dynamic, I think, because you're not only aware of what is happening with your conversation partner in a situation like this, you have these additional considerations of how does this affect other people who are watching this? Like, what if
Yes.
somebody relates to a component of this and I'm not considering how it affects them? What if I say something in here that, especially when it's live, that's off the cuff and it isn't even consistent with my espoused values, which then makes it seem like I'm inconsistent, and then why should
If
people
you don't
trust
speak
me?
up, right,
Right,
yeah.
exactly. So
This is this is an artificial environment for us to have a discussion, to be sure.
Yeah.
And the fact that we're recording it, of course, makes it more, and people will be watching it,
Yeah.
critiquing it. Like we're on our best behavior. I put on a collared shirt. Like before this,
didn't.
I had a,
sorry, Anthony, I love you.
there are things that we do, and when I'm engaging with people on the street with my camera, it is very evident to me that it's not only the person that I'm speaking with, but it's the people who will potentially be watching the video,
Yeah.
or maybe they're listening while I'm live streaming to the Discord server that we have for Street Epistemology. That's always at the back of my mind. But interestingly, that acknowledgement keeps me on my better behavior. So
right.
I may be less likely to swear now because I don't know who might be watching this, or I might be more careful in the words that I use in one of my interactions, realizing that it's being recorded for other people to see.
Yeah. So it's almost like an accountability metric that's built in. Like,
yeah, at the expense of authenticity.
That's fair too. Yeah.
Which is kind of like,
I feel that viscerally.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, here's the funny thing. Like, if we kept talking for 3 more hours, we'd be a lot more calm and relaxed than we are right now. Like, that just sort of naturally happens in engagements.
Yeah.
But it's kind of, I mean, many of the interactions I have are with strangers. So there's that, everyone's sort of on their best behavior, which could lead to a more profound conversation too, by the way, interestingly. Yeah.
How do you think it affects, so when you are talking to somebody, I have 2 questions actually. The first one will be, we'll keep talking about TV. When you tell somebody, hey, or like when you say, do you mind if I record this? Like, it's probably going to go up on a YouTube channel. Do you find that there's a difference in the type of dialogue that you're having with someone who's aware that they're going to be in front of an audience once this dialogue is over versus somebody where there must be somebody you're just one-on-one with no camera? Is there different in the quality of the interaction?
Yeah, you get, I think, well, it's hard to say because I'm usually meeting people for the first time, so I don't have the original non-recorded interaction to compare it to. And if I did, might just be one data point compared to the video example. But my suspicion is that the cameras, they add an element of inauthenticity on both sides. But I try to sort of diffuse that. Like I wear a black shirt because I want the camera to evaporate. I don't have the red light blinking because I don't want people to be fixated on that stuff. You know, I spend a little time building rapport because I want to completely explain what I'm doing and help people feel comfortable.
Yeah.
I can't make them feel comfortable, but I could at least do a few things to maybe help them feel comfortable. But ideally, I think, I mean, the optimal thing is it'd be like, it's an organic conversation that happened to be starting. You're both calm and relaxed. There's a certain element of trust. It's not being observed by other people. You're being your true, authentic selves. But how do you put yourself into that situation and record it or share it, other than maybe relating the story to somebody or typing like the videos are profound because you're watching in real time the reflection that's happening
Yeah.
at the expense of authenticity to a certain degree. I don't think it's very high. Like, I think I don't get the sense that people are holding back too much or being deceptive when I'm asking them questions,
Mm-hmm.
but they might be a little bit more authentic if I wasn't recording it. And
Because
me too.
their
for that
guard
matter.
would be down a little bit less, so they'd be more open to explore without having to fear the repercussions of that
Yeah,
exploration being broadcast.
right. Now I do give people a few options. Sometimes people aren't crazy about being recorded, but they say, listen, you can do audio only,
Yeah.
or could you blur my face? I've had some people request that, and then that might help. But then again, they have to trust that you'll do that too.
Yeah. And they don't know you, so they have no
They
reason to.
usually,
Yeah.
yeah.
But you do blur people's faces, though, if they ask for it. So,
Hmm.
so you're at least true to your word. So you've got a reputation of being somebody who is trustworthy, and that's one of the reasons that I respect you.
I try to, but the person who on the street who may just be meeting me for the
Well,
first
they'd have
time,
no idea.
they don't have that history.
Right.
Yeah.
So when somebody does approach you on the street, like, do you pick specific? I've often wondered this. Like, when you're going in to do SE, I can understand doing university campuses because there's so many people willing to talk and there's more people milling around. Like, but where else is a good place? I've seen people on like walking paths and running paths. Is there like a specific area, or is this something that you could just like literally?
I mean, you could do it anywhere.
Yeah.
If you, I feel like I'm speaking to like 1% of 1% when I'm saying this, but if
Mm.
you wanted to go out and record these talks, try to find a quiet location where people have time. Maybe they're not feeling so rushed, and they might be coming to a location to get away from the hustle and bustle of life,
Mm-hmm.
and just think about things. It's probably even better if it's locations where individuals or couples might be going to, as opposed to whole families, because who's going to talk to a guy with a camera, or even without a camera,
With their kids present, yeah.
about a deeply held belief with their kids hanging on them?
Yeah.
Who's going to do that?
Yeah.
Probably not too many people.
Yeah, well, I couldn't imagine. So, all right, so we'll start taking questions now. We've been talking for an hour, believe it or not, and I don't want to hold you too long. So I will
Okay.
take questions. If I see one super chat already from the Paulogia, and then
Who's that?
Yeah, some guy. I don't know. He's always watching my show. It's so weird. It's like he's always here. So if you have questions, at me or super chat me, and I will ask Anthony the questions. But I need you to at me so that I can see them. And apparently this is the universal hand signal for at. All right, so the first question is from Paul, and it is, oh gosh, it is, why is Shannon so bad at technology? If you could eliminate one dialectic tactic from common usage, what would it be? Oh, I have thoughts about that. Oh,
Ooh,
I have thoughts.
that's a damn good question. Let me think.
I have a list.
Do you can you start with yours, and then maybe I can think about mine? Like,
Yeah.
was that just for me or for both of us?
Both of us. But I can start with mine, and I'll see where
Mm-hmm.
I'll see where you go from this. So
Okay.
one strategy that I very much dislike is people touting sources that are salacious and not and consistently so touting sources that are salacious and going, wow, if this is true, that's huge. Could like like presenting the information to people in a way that they are tacitly endorsing it without actually actively voicing that they're endorsing it, so that they can propagate it without fear of consequence for being one of the propagators and not get the pushback. So basically people touting propagating misinformation as though they're spreading a rumor, not that they're spreading misinformation, so that they don't have to. So that is a rhetorical device, or just something that people do generally, I think, is a huge problem, which is society as a whole.
Huh. Okay. Then I'll chase that with leveraging your expertise
Oh.
to beat people down with it, rather than like I don't know,
Interesting.
an expert in a particular field, holding that above a person,
Okay.
and not seeing maybe even more broadly, not seeing a person as an equal.
Okay.
Like, I've been doing this for 20 years. I have expertise in this area,
Yeah.
and let me educate. This is the thing. Let me bring you up to speed and educate you on it. Like maybe that assumption that the person doesn't quite have the understanding that they're lacking, and I need to educate you on this. I don't know if that's a good
So
one.
you don't like the condescension in that area, or you don't like the people
No, it's not.
weaponizing their expertise as though they can speak authoritatively without having to support it?
I think it's more like leveraging your characteristics over people. So like if I go to a university, I'm 50 years old and I might run into a 25-year-old. Right then and there's a disparity.
Okay.
Likely more in their minds than mine, because I really want them to see me as an equal, but they'll defer to me. They'll say, yes, sir. They've elevated me in their eyes. Now I can leverage that. I could specifically go to areas where there's that disparity and leverage it. And perhaps people might be more willing to come around to my point of view just because I'm on a different footing than them.
So your critique is that, which is fair, I think, that this person is exploiting a power dynamic.
Thank you. Yes, that's what I meant. And I wrote down power dynamics on my note over here. Yeah, that's exactly what I'm saying. Like leveraging power dynamics for advancing your narrative or your point of view.
Oh,
that pisses me off. Like no matter where you stand or your level of expertise, I think it would be healthy, especially if you're intent on exploring how they arrived at their conclusion, taking yourself out of it as much as possible and not leveraging that power dynamic.
Interesting. Okay. Yeah. No.
That's sort of a pet. That's a pet peeve of mine when I see it.
Oh, that's a good one. I really like that one. Okay, perfect. And that's something that people should just generally I could probably go on and on and on. We have more questions though, so I'll have to move on.
Let's move on. Let's move on.
All right. So this is from
Tough
Todd
question.
Wentz. That's Paul. He's pretty cool. He's all right.
He likes those zingers.
Todd Went would like to know, how would you start a conversation with a QAnon shaman if you were given a chance? Oh, I would actually die to talk. I would love to talk to that guy. I don't know if I would broadcast it though until I saw how it went, because there's a risky area there where he could be touting misinformation that I'm allowing him the platform. I would need to see how it went first.
One of the first things that I would probably do is ask that individual or anyone, almost, you can really use this approach with anybody, is have a discussion about what they think the word true means. Because very often what you find...
You would have a very different definition than me, I would think.
Yeah, a lot of people, I think that truth is closer to an opinion than fact. And if you're starting off on that foot, everything else that follows... So, for example, if you start like, what is the main reason why you think that the election was rigged? Well, if they don't think truth is objective, no answer they give really is going to matter. They don't even need to have a reason to think that that's true, because it's just their subjective opinion. So one of the first things that I would do with that individual, I think, would just have a discussion about, like, can you tell me what you think about the word true or the word truth? Now, that individual may say, well, truth means my Lord and Savior or something, right? Yeah. And you see variations of this where they tie it to their God belief, but that would be one of the first things that I would do. What would you ask them?
First things that I don't know what the first thing that I would do with him is. I would have to figure out. I love the truth question. Now I really like the truth question, but I think that you would need to establish a baseline to prevent him from going down every rabbit hole conceivable. Because a lot of people who are conspiracy minded like that, it's not really like gish galloping, but they follow every trail that's available to them. They follow almost like an escape hatch from being focused into the conversation.
Yep.
So
3 minutes later, you're not talking about the election or the Capitol building. You're talking about the moon landing or something.
Exactly. Yes. Exactly. Like they just keep parlaying into like the next like it's almost as though the stream of consciousness is the way they have a conversation. And
what would you say to them?
It would be more a dialectic strategy that I would employ than it's like any one specific question. I like the truth question, but the dialectic strategy would be to find something that I know is demonstrably untrue that this person touts, that's very easy to refute, and focus in on that aspect so that I can maybe get them to the point where they can see where we deviate in our reasoning, and I can explain how my reasoning leads me differently than they are, and ask them. This is a strategy I employ quite consistently. It's not like street epistemology is saying, okay, well, here's where we got to. We both looked at this same list of evidence. I went X, Y, Z, whatever, and landed here. Can you explain to me the flaw in my reasoning process? Can you tell me where the flaw in my reasoning process sits that caused me to come to a different conclusion than you? So instead of me having to peel back the layers of like whatever rabbit trail they go down, I pick one claim, walk them through how I get to the other side of that claim, compare it against what they do, and get them to explain to me why I'm wrong.
That's good. I was going to say, after asking them about the truth thing, if they think truth is objective, and I wouldn't move on until they acknowledged that it was.
Yeah.
The next thing that I would probably ask them is, as you encounter these claims, well, another thing I might ask them is, what's the difference between claims and evidence? And have a broader. So when you talk to people who are really, really dug in and seemingly, I'll just leave it. Just they're thinking differently.
Yeah.
Oftentimes, talking about broader concepts like truth or how do you form beliefs? How do you decide what you accept and what you reject? What does evidence mean to you? If somebody said something, do you qualify that as evidence, or does it need to reach a different standard before you say that's good evidence or bad evidence? How do you determine what evidence you accept and reject? I would be speaking with them in these really broad terms, and they would probably be bringing up specific examples like the moon landing and the hoax and Obama being a Muslim and all this other stuff.
Yeah.
And it's tempting to chase those individual things. But what I found is that if you keep it broad and you focus on the broader concepts like truth and evidence and belief revision and what is your standard for evidence, these can be really effective in talking with people like that.
Oh, that's interesting. See, it's just a strategy I've never contemplated, because my fear when I start broadly like that is that they're just going to wax on about this ridiculous definition. And if there's anything that I can't stand, and everybody knows this about me, it's a conversation that's just 45 minutes of arguing about what the definition of a goddamn word is. That is like
I'm content with that, honestly.
I can't stand it, Anthony.
No,
I don't have it in me.
Love it. I love it.
I know you do. I'm not that guy.
Well, let me say, I don't think I've ever spent 30 minutes on the definition. Usually it's 2 minutes.
Have you ever talked to somebody about what atheism is? Because I have.
Oh, well, well, that's a whole nother topic. Like,
right?
I'm not willing to die on the hill defending a definition of a word. I will go with their definition and explore their belief using their terminology.
Okay. So whatever definition they gave, you would just accept that and then see and then start picking. Yeah. Okay. Interesting. Okay.
Right. Because this all goes, like when we're doing SE, we're mainly focused about their belief tower, their belief structure,
right? How
they view words, how they view truth, how they view evidence and belief revision, and what does reliable even mean?
Got ya.
Like you have to kind of learn their language before you can explore their beliefs.
Right.
So I'm content with chasing those definitions down. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
It's frustrating. It is frustrating though. I get it.
I would rather throw myself in front of a bus than talk about the definition of a word for an hour. But I can see why it's important. It's just, that's not what I'm interested in. I'm interested in how people justify their reasoning and where it's different. Like I think you're more interested in getting people to the point where they're in justified positions, and this is a good tool for that. I also want people to be in justified positions, but what fascinates me, and maybe it's the psychologist in me, is how did you get to something so different than me? Like, we both have brains in our head. We're both basically raised in the same kind of society, but are surrounded by potentially like different influences. Is there something underlying? Like what gets you to the point that you can go so far into left field when we both have ostensibly the same access to everything? Like, how does that happen?
They don't think that they're in left field. They think you're in left field. So,
right.
which is what I love what you were suggesting earlier. Like, what am I doing wrong? How did I come to this conclusion?
That unravels people, because like when
you ask them to do that?
When I throw my reasoning on a pyre and say, all right, this is what I did. This is how I got here. Tell me where I went wrong. Tell me why I'm unreasonable to hold this position. If you get to the point, because if I am being unreasonable, I do want to know. And there's times I've changed positions as a result of that. Like I've changed positions, like nuanced perspectives more so, like not whole cloth recently, but there's been nuance in positions that I'm like, okay, yeah, like you can poke little holes in that. So it's just a good practice anyway, I think. But if I'm pretty well solid and they have to pull apart my reasoning, that becomes very frustrating to them because they have to kind of admit that like I'm justified in my position, which means if yours is so opposite for me and you just had to admit that I'm justified in my position, what does that mean about yours?
See, this reminds me of a really important distinction for what we do in SE, because we really do try to make it all about the person who has the belief and who's made the claim, and we're exploring in their terms, their language, their words, their meanings, their belief tower. And what you're proposing is challenging them to explain how to convince you that you're wrong.
Yeah.
And correct me if that isn't what you're saying.
Kind of, or why I should, or where I went wrong and what I need to do to get to where they are.
I love that. That's good. Yeah, that's good. I like that.
Yeah.
Because what's important is how they became convinced.
Yeah.
And many times when you explore people's beliefs, they're giving you reasons to justify their claim that you'll find convincing, not the reasons that convince them.
The reasons that convince them are almost always personal when it comes down to it, for the most part, when it comes to belief structure.
You don't know until you ask and engage with them using some questions. Yeah.
They are often, though. Personal experience over and over and over again. And that's the thing. If you have it, not everybody, but if you came to a belief through a personal experience, you can't reason someone else into having that experience. You just have to acknowledge it's had an experience.
Yeah. Well, yeah. So, and I think I've maybe even heard you say this. So this is maybe more for your audience than for you, but when somebody mentions that they have a personal experience, it's probably important to acknowledge that you think that they had an experience.
Of course.
It's just the conclusion or the attribution that's in question.
Yeah.
Like, how did you decide it was a ghost as opposed to a leprechaun or something?
Yes, exactly. Or some sort of delusion, some sort of misperception. Like,
yeah.
I always find it's very important to acknowledge that I'm not saying you did not have this experience. I'm sure obviously you did. Like, I have to believe you. The only person who knows whether or not you had an experience is you.
However, but if you start giving reasons to explain away their conclusion, a lot of people will interpret that as you saying, I don't believe that you had this experience.
That is fair, because you're just saying your experience is like, these are all the reasons that your experience is invalid.
Yeah.
And that's what they're hearing.
And our identities are a collection of our experiences. So it's an attack on the person, which makes people defensive.
That is such a good point. That's interesting to think about, because I think a lot of the times, especially in these dialogues, our inclination is to go, okay, well, can't you see why your experience is, probably wrong?
It's the conclusion.
Or could be wrong.
It's the conclusion that needs to be explored. So like I'll literally say, listen, it seems like you experienced something. What I'm curious is, how did you arrive on that and decide to stop because you felt that was the best explanation of this event that you had?
Interesting.
So you're recognizing that something happened to them and they see it as an opening to really consider it.
But then I'm also weary of, from a perceptual perspective, like encouraging people that you should just believe perceptual experiences, and that, like, I think more people need to recognize that perceptual experiences are inherently flawed and why and how. And that's important because people put so much stock into them.
They do. See, this is where I think the outsider test really comes in handy, because you could say, so it sounds like you had a personal experience and you arrived at the conclusion that it's a ghost.
Yeah.
Because you hear footsteps down the hallway at night when you're sleeping and you wake up to these footsteps. And if somebody else were to hear the same footsteps at night and they're concluding that it's a leprechaun, would you think that their personal experience justifies the conclusion that they have arrived at? And you have to be careful here, because sometimes people will say, well, yeah, sure, leprechauns are just as real as ghosts. But hopefully you can even ask.
Maybe
listen,
it was a leprechaun.
I watch your shows often and I see the calls that you get.
Yeah. right, we have more questions. Okay. Oh, this is a good question. From and Ben C. Can you use SE on yourself? If so, how would you go about it? And does bias become an issue? That is an interesting question. I like that question.
Bias. Yeah, we all have biases. You can do the best that you can to eliminate your biases. They're going to always still be there. You can use SE on yourself, but your bias will likely get in the way. The best advice that I would have is find somebody who knows how to use street epistemology or some other similar method. And this is I'm not aware of a method that comes close to the SE approach, which is why I'm such a big proponent of it. But you can ask somebody, like I'm a Bernie supporter. I could use SE, and I've done it on some of the things that I think are true, maybe regarding his policies or stances, but it would be better for me to seek somebody out to explore my views. And I bet there are people now that are queuing up to do that with me on my political views. But opening yourself up to people using this tool on your own beliefs is probably the best way to go about doing it.
Could you, like, if you don't have anybody available to you that you could do that with, I don't think that doing it mentally using your internal monologue would be great, because you're so prone to internal unconscious distraction that it would be very easy to lose focus and go down all those rabbit holes if you're just basically having an internal dialogue with yourself. But in a written format, like because that forces you to hone in on just contemplating the question in order to get it out in the same way you would verbally. So,
maybe I've never tried it. Do you journal? It's interesting that you would even recommend writing it out. I hardly write anything.
Oh my gosh, free form writing is one of the best things that people can do to organize their thoughts. Like if your thoughts go into chaos states, which a lot of people do, people with ADD, ADHD, a lot of times you can get in disorganized thought patterns because you're thinking about so many things simultaneously that it's difficult to focus on any one thing. If you do free form writing where you just put pen to paper, you don't care about, grammar or syntax or punctuation, and you just start writing out words that are in your head, you land and then read them back to yourself, you get this sense of perspective regarding what's at the forefront of your mind that helps you better organize what needs to be addressed and see kind of a mirror to yourself that you wouldn't have otherwise. And it also forces you to slow down and introspect and think instead of being in a state of chaos. So I've used that because my mind goes all day, every day. I'm at any point in time, I'm thinking of 47 different things that are either making me happy or stressing me out, or I have to do, or I need to
so then that tool would be the thing to do. Yeah. I don't have that issue. Like I could be driving down the road, I see a billboard, it makes me wonder if that thing is true, whether I believe it or not, and then I find myself doing sort of an essay in my mind, like, okay, what exactly is the claim? What is my main reason for thinking that thing is true or not? What's my next best reason? What are the implications if I discovered that that's not a good reason? How did I verify that that's a good reason? That's a great question to ask yourself. Like, what is my main reason for thinking that that's true? And how did I verify that that's a good reason? Just that alone is like 80% of it.
Yeah. That's just a good way to approach things, I think. Do you think that you're just so practiced at it at this point that it's almost second nature? Like you just created this schema in your head that like, this is the scaffolding through which all my belief systems need to be set upon.
Not every belief. I'm not a robot where I constantly evaluate every claim that goes through. But
like, did I wake up this morning? Am I here? Am I eating right now?
there's a lot of assumptions that I make, but there needs to be something that happens to prompt me to consider it.
Okay.
So like maybe I notice friends arguing about a topic on Twitter.
Okay.
That happens quite a bit. Like I noticed like Dawkins said something, somebody responded to it. What's my position?
Twitter you were on?
What's my position on this thing?
Yeah.
What would change my mind? Who's right here? These are the types of things that I find myself, but there's usually a trigger that prompts it to happen.
Interesting. So well, which I think is fair too, because all of us just have these things that we take for granted that just keep us walking through life.
You have to.
That we just don't think about, right?
I think we would lose our minds if we evaluated every little thing.
We would. You'd have to do all the free form writing in all of the land in order to survive.
Yeah.
All right, wait.
I wanted to say though, like
Yeah.
regarding the writing, one thing that I've noticed, um, one thing that really helped me understand what was happening in these conversations
Mm-hmm.
was editing the videos and then even adding captions to them. So you're slowing it down, you're paying really close attention to what's being said, the question that I asked, realizing that I could have asked it in a much better way, recognizing, oh, there was confusion there. They weren't pausing because they were thinking, they were pausing because they were perplexed by the question that I asked.
Oh,
So
so
like,
you see little nuanced components where you may have misinterpreted a signal in.
yes,
Oh, that's valuable.
yes,
I reckon.
yeah.
Yeah.
That's why I think like these video examples or even written discussions or screenshots, many times people in these SE communities will screenshot,
Mm-hmm.
hopefully with the permission of the person that they usually blur names out and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But like going through the conversation again, you start to realize, and that trains your brain on how to think about the claims that you encounter in your daily life.
Yeah. Yeah. It's kind of like what I was saying. Like you just get to the point that this is second nature because you're
Mm-hmm.
so used to approaching dialectics and seeing how it affects other people that it's just a scaffolding that you build. Okay, we have one more question. I'm going to hold you
Okay.
over. I'm so sorry. I'm concerned about, this is from Bad at Pseudoscience. That's a cute name. I am concerned about the abrupt challenge to their beliefs. To many people, their beliefs are a coping mechanism for a bad situation, and it could cause them harm.
Abrupt is the key word there. Yes, of course, any interaction that you have with a person could result in harm, whether I'm ridiculing somebody, giving them facts, or using the SE approach or anything else, or a combination of those things.
Mm-hmm.
So the second you interact with somebody, there's the potential to cause harm, whether you intended it or not. And that holds for street epistemology as well. They use the word abrupt there, which when we're doing SE, it's usually very calm and slow and methodical and almost even boring. It's not usually a very rapid back and forth like you would see in an argument. And now they're not always that way. Sometimes the interactions are very quick, especially if it's in written form on Twitter. Sometimes we're just firing stuff back and forth, but it's still an SE conversation. You can be direct with people. Here's my tip, basically, is occasionally check in with your conversation partner to see how are things going? Is this moving too fast? Do you want to take a break? That I think is the solution, or at least a way to mitigate the possibility that you can be overwhelming somebody to the point where they're not even recognizing that you're harming them. You don't want to get to that point. So I would just say like slow it down, check in occasionally. But even if you do all that, you still could harm a person from interacting with them.
And also anything that they're exposed to, like if somebody stumbled across this channel in our conversation right now, for example, and was like, oh, maybe I'll use that on myself, like they said, and they come to this abrupt,
Yes.
like that's also a possibility. But I think what the thing that I hold issue with this question is the assumption that they maybe aren't already in a position where that belief could be harming them, that they're in a good state currently, and that doing this will put them in a bad state. And I understand that what people are talking about here, I think generally, is the difficulty of like rebirth and change and the pain that comes with deconstruction and reconstruction in and of itself, in any direction I think that you go. Like the pain that comes with a paradigm shift in your worldview is something that's not avoidable if, like, otherwise we would just be wandering around never challenging any ideologies or beliefs. We would just be like, well, everybody's just happy where they are right now, everybody shut up. That would be the only alternative to me, and I don't think that that's reasonable or healthy. Yeah, so that's what I would have to say with that.
Yeah, I mean, if people truly held to that position that they were intent on avoiding any harm whatsoever, they wouldn't be interacting with the world or consuming any content. They'd probably be sitting in a room, in a dark room, in a corner.
Yeah.
You know, we just don't. Most people don't do that. So it kind of comes with the territory. But I'm careful with the perception that me saying that is sort of giving the green light. And I hope that's not the case. Like,
No, I think you
I'm
still
not
need
advocating.
consent. You still need consent to have the conversation.
Yes.
People still need to know
Right.
what you're talking about and what it might lead to.
Yeah. Right. But they could still miss that, right? They can pull up one of our videos
Yeah.
and it profoundly changes them. That happened. I mean, that's happened to us, I think, hasn't it? Yeah. And then we look back and be like, damn, I'm so glad that I had that talk or watched that video.
Yeah.
But there's a painful process oftentimes with these deeply held beliefs, letting them go.
Cool. So I had a question from Autumn before we go, and then there's one more question, and I promise I'll let you leave. So Autumn from Notes from Autumn had a really good question that we were talking about before, and I was like, I'm not sure where I stand on this actually, because I think that, you know, tricking somebody into having a conversation under a false premise is, no, not ethical. Like, it's not good. Like, if you say, hey, come on over, we're going to, you know, we're going to have dinner and talk about the football game, and now I'm selling you Tupperware. You know what I mean? Like, I tricked you to get
Like an intervention or something?
Yeah,
where,
or
yeah.
Well, there might be an argument for an intervention, but like,
really?
I think for an intervention, if somebody's harming them, like, God, this will never end if we could.
I know.
But what if? I get her question was, what if you had like a course that was like, hey, come here and learn about X thing, but really you're teaching critical thinking. Like, they signed up to learn one thing, and what you're doing is teaching critical thinking because that'll ultimately benefit them. Like, you tricked them into being critical thinkers.
Yeah, I wouldn't advocate for tricking anybody. Your insincerity will come across, and anything that you're trying to promote, even if it's beneficial for them, and they would even admit that it was, it probably won't be seen that way. And you may have made it more difficult for them to actually consider those other ideas if they felt duped into being introduced to them in the first place. So I wouldn't advocate for that.
But then what about like clickbait? Like, I put clickbait titles on my video, right?
I know I'm so tempted to, like,
so
I've had this
that's
discussion.
essentially kind of like false advertising, but then people could easily just click away. It's
Well,
as opposed
yeah,
to a
okay,
course
so
where you're
clickbait.
paying for.
Yeah. I've really struggled with this because I've had really good talks that I think could be healthy for people to watch. And my titles are not really that clickbaity, but I've actually considered making them such because the benefit is better. But then I think that dilutes all the ethical stuff that I'm trying to advocate for. So,
Anthony Magnabosco destroys Christian, and then it's just like a nice, normal SE conversation.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I know I could do that, but then again, like, if you do that, you'll probably piss people off. I don't know what the implications are.
You have to think about your interlocutor there too, that you're representing. Like, if you say Anthony Magnabosco destroys Christian, like,
right,
and then you're talking to a Christian, that person's going to be like, hey, what the fuck? Like,
exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And it undermines all the stuff that we're advocating for. So, like, even though, like, this is the slow and like we could probably be way further ahead than we are with SE if we cut corners.
You can't, though, because it needs to be a long-term tool that's ethical and good and like robust and can be passed down and used well.
That's my thinking, right? Like, we sort of have to practice what we preach. But then there might be other practitioners who say, no, I'm fine with a clickbaity title because I want to get 10,000 views on this because we want people to learn this approach and I think it's better for society. Like, okay, you can do that, but I'm going to go this different direction. So we'll have differences on that.
Cool. All right, there's one question left and then I'll let you go. From Whizbang. Hi, Shannon. I just wanted to say that I appreciate your approach in conversations. I love your empathetic handling on discussions with others. Oh, that's sweet. Thank you. This isn't even a question. Hope you and Anthony have a nice day. Thank you. What a lovely way to end. that's
very nice.
That was really sweet. Thank you for that. That was very, very kind. So thank you, Anthony, for coming and chatting with all of us here today and for me. And I hope you felt heard and I enjoyed it very,
absolutely.
very much.
No, I enjoyed it as well. This went exactly as I was hoping and expecting. And thank you for giving me the opportunity to talk about this murky area of belief exploration. We don't have all the answers, but as we move forward with it, I'm hoping that some of these ideas will come more into focus because it's a little blurry right now. Yeah.
Thank you for being open to coming and talking with me. I appreciate it. And
absolutely.
In case anybody is looking to see more of you after this, where should they go?
Go to streetepistemology.com. You can find a link to communities, resources. There's a wonderful Discord server, and it's not official yet, but we're very close to publicly announcing a couple of interactive workshops, like 6 or 7 of them simultaneously on a Monday evening, where people can spend an hour and a half learning how to use this approach with different facilitators. It's going to be awesome.
Oh, that's really cool. Well, I'm very
Yeah.
glad that you came here. I am going to put up my end screen. I am not professional at all, so nobody can see us now, but they can still hear us. Anthony's waving. He's doing what I usually do, which is wave when no one can see us. And and as always, everyone, help elevate the discourse. Bye.
Do it.
Do it.